They came in the quiet hour between breakfast and the mowing, three hard knocks like fists on wood, and something inside my chest that said, "Pay attention." I opened the door, and there were four of them on my porch. Uniforms that looked real enough to make your stomach drop, boots planted like they owned the concrete, and one of them with his hand on a rifle like this was a movie, and we were the extras. That's the hook. That's the moment the neighborhood stops being a place where kids ride bikes and becomes a scene you tell people about at bars, because nothing ordinary ever happens that way until it does. My name is Alex Rivera. I live on Willow Lane, in the sort of subdivision where everyone knows everyone's trash day, where we trade sugar and small favors and petty complaints about lawn heights and mailbox flags. My wife, Jenna, is the kind of person who waters the hydrangeas like they're her children. I say that jokingly, but she's the steady anchor who makes the place feel like home. That morning she was inside, folding laundry, and by the time she came to the door, the four men were already speaking, clipped and cold. "Mr. Rivera, we have orders to take custody," said the one who sounded like he'd practiced intimidation in front of a mirror. He lifted a badge and a piece of paper, the kind of paper that might make a sane person comply without thinking. I laughed, because what else do you do when your brain scrambles for a joke and finds nothing? "This is a mistake," I said. Jenna's face had gone small. Our neighbor, Mrs. Lowe, appeared at the end of the driveway with her phone out, filming, because that's what people do now, evidence in slow motion. The men didn't lower their voices. That only makes authority louder. They had scripted answers, ready lines. Behind the uniforms was a company crest, one I didn't recognize, but it looked professional enough to make a heart race. Then the real sheriff walked out of nowhere, or maybe she'd always been there, and we just hadn't seen. Deputy Elena Cortez, in full county uniform, boots dusty from patrol. She stepped between us like a person who knew how to measure risk, and she said two words that tilted the world back toward sense. "Hold on." Her radio crackled, and she sent the same question our phones would later search for. "Dispatch, confirm warrant for Alex Rivera." 2 static breaths later came the answer that makes a room change temperature. "Negative. No active warrants." You can feel authority change the air. The imposter's smiles thinned. The leader tried to keep the play going, voice silk over iron. "We're compliance officers, community enforcement, but authority and paperwork are two different things." The sheriff looked at their papers, looked at the badge replicas, and benched their bluff with a look that said I'd noticed the cheap glue. Phones hummed louder. The man with the rifle shifted his weight, a small animal sensing a leash. What follows is what people grab clips of. One of the imposters lunges, not a grand movie tackle, but a desperate shove, and Elena reacts like she's done this before. She keeps her voice steady, says, "Drop it." And when he doesn't, things get physical. It's messy and quick and human. Not the slow-motion Hollywood thing, but a real, ugly tussle where elbows meet flesh, and a neighbor steps up to help, and another neighbor drops to the grass and sobs. Jenna later told me she thought about all the little things that knit up a life: our couch, the smell of coffee as the scuffle happened, and that detail stuck with me, because danger has a way of stripping you to what you care about fastest. They cuffed 2 of the 4. One ran and was gone by the time deputies set up a perimeter. Later we learned he'd hit a fence, limped, and disappeared into a patch of pines, which is one of those small humiliations crime often ends in. The other 2 looked like men who'd planned their careers in anonymity. Cheap line, cheap badges, a willingness to do harm for pay. The one who didn't make it through the door, the leader, kept mouthing a name: Council. Council Security. That clue would become a thread we started pulling on that would unravel more than a porch confrontation. We learned who hired them within 48 hours, because in a small town, secrets are not good at hiding. The HOA president, an earnest-looking man named Daniel Hale's soft voice, pressed shirts, had organized what he called a community compliance initiative. The idea, he said, was to enforce covenants, tidy up property violations, force out the chronic rule breakers. But behind the corporate name and the neat quarterly reports sat something else: pressure tactics designed to extract sales, to herd homeowners into signing away rights, to make buyers anxious enough to sell. Money, it turned out, moves men in quiet neighborhoods as easily as water moves the dust. Daniel's motive had layers: resentment at families who rented out homes, a board member's unpaid dues, pressure from developers who saw infill lots and opportunity. He told himself it was about order. He told other people it was about safety. The men who came to our door were the muscle of a scheme meant to scare folks into compliance. The tidy euphemism was a convincing non-compliant parcels to conform. We believed we were neighbors. The truth was a small conspiracy dressed up in HOA minutes and contractor invoices. I'll be honest, the next few weeks felt like being inside a slow drumbeat. News vans came from the regional office reporters who knew how to make a backyard into a headline. We filed reports. The county attorney took an interest. There were meetings at the clubhouse where the fluorescent lights made everyone look small and honest in ways that hurt. Daniel defended himself with the calm of someone who believes his own half-truths. He spoke about community standards and protecting property values, and he did not look, at least at first, like a man who'd ordered men to knock on doors with guns. But we had video, so much video. Phones, door cameras, a neighbor's ring that caught the leader's lopsided grin as he faked credentials. There were invoices from a company called Council Security Solutions that showed payments routed through shell entities. Patterns emerged. Other neighborhoods, other towns, the same company, the same plaintiffs. It wasn't just parish enthusiasm. It was entrepreneurial intimidation. People had lost rights and paid fines and felt safer paying to shut up than to stand up. That's how power grows. In the spaces where people feel overwhelmed and choose a small surrender. What changed it, for me, was a moment in the clubhouse when an elderly woman, Mrs. Whitaker, who'd lived on Willow Lane longer than any of the new roofs on our street, stood up and spoke. Her voice wavered, but she said what we all thought. We moved here because we trusted each other. It's a simple thing, but it landed like a fist on a table. We voted to recall Daniel from the HOA board that night. It was messy, awkward, the kind of democratic ugliness that's actually beautiful because it's real people making real choices. Legal steps followed. The county justice system moved slowly because systems do. The men who'd been at our door faced charges for impersonation and intimidation. The ones who ran to the woods were pursued. Council Security Solutions books were subpoenaed. Prosecutors found invoices that linked the HOA's discretionary fund to payments for special compliance operations. The paper trail glowed like a map in a dark room. Daniel was arrested a month after that meeting. He cried when they read him the charges, not the theatrical crying of a man overthrown, but the dry, hollow kind that comes when your safety net of excuses collapses. But here's the part that stayed with me, and the part one want you to argue about in the comments. Exposing Daniel and shutting down council security didn't fix everything. It unhooked a visible head from a hydra of private enforcement that thrives where public oversight is weak. People had been paying for peace in ways that eroded neighborly trust. Contracts had been signed, deeds had been recorded, scare tactics had forced sales. There were families who'd moved because the pressure became too heavy, and others who had quietly paid fines to avoid more confrontations. Money changed hands in ways that never made it to a receipt we could show to a camera. And so we were left with two kinds of aftermath. The immediate, cinematic one, the arrest, the clap of cameras, the exhale, and the quieter, long-term reckoning. Jenna and I sat on our porch one evening after the raids, the air thick with cicadas, and we talked about how easily a community can fracture when incentives align for power. She said something I wrote down later. You always think your neighborhood is a place of small things, but those small things add up to the big stuff. That's true. The hydrangeas didn't care about politics. They kept growing. But people did. If there's a moral to this, or at least a question worth wrestling with, it's this. When does protecting property become protecting profit? And when does neighborliness become a commodity? I don't have a neat answer. I know only that vigilance matters, and that a camera on a porch is a small kind of armor, and that community governance messy, human governance needs sunlight more than sermons. So here's what I want from you. Tell me where you stand. Was Daniel a villain or a symptom? Did the men on my porch deserve everything they got? Or did our system fail to notice symptoms before they became crises? Have you seen something like this in your town? HOA overreach, private security run amok, subtle coercion dressed in paper, or do you think we overreacted? Drop a comment, say your piece, tell the story you've been holding back. Share if you think your neighbors should know how easily trust can be sold. And if you're new here, subscribe for more stories like this, honest slices of how ordinary lives bump against systems that don't always have our best interest at heart. Because this didn't end with a buckle of handcuffs and a newspaper headline, it ended with neighbors learning to look at each other again, to ask hard questions at HOA meetings, to demand transparency, and to remember that a community is, at the end of the day, a bunch of people who have to decide they're worth protecting. That's the thing that made me sleep better after it was over. Not the arrests, not the headlines, but the fact that folks came back out to their porches, to their lawns, to their lives. They watered the hydrangeas. They argued about trash days. They mended fences, and they watched for one another, and that, maybe, is the smallest, most stubborn kind of justice we have.